It's funny because I'm looking at the camera and there's like a countdown. 3, 2, 1. Okay. As the summer sun continues to heat up our towns with its solar power, we are exploring, in the next series of talks, the idea of solar, S-O-U-L, power. So the readings were perfect. They went along with our soul, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I love Ernest Holmes' definition in the glossary of his Science of Mind book on power, the energy by which everything lives. We define the divine as this energy, an energy beyond our comprehension, for lack of any other third dimension description of this incredible force of creation. It is that energy that I want us to tap into this month. The energy that is found deep within our souls. Whether we're aware of it or not, it is there. The question this morning then is, are you living by that power, or are you living by force? A question that was inspired by the book, Power versus Force, Dr. David Hawkins, but just the title alone gets you to thinking. Am I living my life in that divine power, or am I living it, forcing things to happen? And so I have an example that happened like 8 years ago to me that really brought this idea home. A lot of things do. Maybe you can relate to it and find the spiritual truths in it. So I had never lived alone before, right? So now I'm in this house, and I'm living alone, and I hear leaks and drips. Now this, gets my humanity, my human ego and mind really running. So it's like dripping between the walls of my house. And the siding, between the wall and the siding. And this dripping is driving me crazy. But it never sounded like a really major repair. So I didn't want to call the roof guy yet. I didn't want to get a new roof at that point. So I called the gutter people, had them check it. The gutters were fine. Everything sounded but I'm hearing what now sounds like a waterfall in my mind. So I'm starting to freak out because the roof had been dripping a little bit. Had just moved in. I go outside and I listen. I listen and I hear it. I hear the dripping. And it sounds more and more like a waterfall, because you know what our minds do with any kind of situation. But they really go into overtime, and I'm really freaking out. And the heck with all my spiritual tools. I got to jump into action here. I got to make something happen. So I sent a long text to my realtor at the time. And then that was not enough. So I'm going through my phone book. And I call my lawyer, who's a friend of mine, and I tell him all this stuff, like really seriously. But then I'm running out of names to call. And the names I'm calling, they're not home. Funny how the universe conspires like that. But then I get to a minister friend, so I leave a message, a text message for them. Pray for me. Pray for peace of mind that my house isn't falling down. Because I was convinced it was falling down. And this went on in my experience for about a half hour or so. And I finally sit down and I call the minister for prayer. Because this whole time I had been trying to force. Because, you go right, I don't know if you're like me, you go right into fix-it mode. Who do I call? What do I have to do? Who do I know? I got to make this happen. And it obviously was not working. So I start to sit and think to myself, okay, you're not working it here. You got to release this, let it go, and let God. Sit down and do my affirmative prayer, do my spiritual mind treatment. Take a couple of really deep breaths. So I called the roofer, finally. I called the roofer. He's on his way to the shore for vacation. So I'm like now believing my house is falling down. And I had no recourse at that point but to let go and go and listen, because if you get obsessive like I can, you have to go keep listening for the sound. And it still sounds like a waterfall. So I'm not talking to anyone at that point. but I didn't know where the noise was coming from. And on my fifth time in listening to the wall, this is all in my bathroom, I'm listening to this sound. I walk by the sink and I see that the faucet was a very, very slight drip. Now I'm telling you that faucet was not dripping. The many times I went in and out, there was no faucet dripping. But now it's dripping. I'm like, seriously? And I turn that on and this waterfall stops. I mean, it sounded like a waterfall. And so I text my minister friend up and I let her know, oh, I think it's solved. I think it's solved. And she had been in prayer for me from the first text, and I didn't know that. So to me, prayer is always like, turn to prayer after you see you can't force things yourself. I let the power of the divine, the power of God take over. And when that happens, and we truly have to let go and let God, because it's obvious in many situations in our lives that we cannot force the situation to happen. We cannot get to that solution that we want to, but when we let go, it's amazing the different experiences and the way the divine, the universal law conspires to bring forth a solution. What an amazing lesson that was, and many lessons, I'm sure we all do, where we see, I of myself can do nothing. It's the God within that doeth the work, because that is the real truth. And so that was amazing. That was an amazing lesson in the law of good, of letting go and letting God take over. And then I find out, as an addendum to that story, a month later, I have aluminum siding now. I don't know anything about houses. This is the first time I'm living alone, right? And aluminum siding, when the sun hits it, makes a noise that sounds like water. It makes this weird noise, and it sounds like water. It's making all this noise. So that's the addendum to it. But my mind, have you ever been in a situation where your mind takes over? And boy, what a scenario you can get. I mean, it's just the sun hitting the aluminum, but I'm convinced my house is falling down. Anyway, I got a new roof, but anyway. Trusting in the law is the big part here. And when I talk about law, I'm talking about the divine law of God. The divine law of God. Now, I know the Reverend Barb talked about foundation class. That is about the creative process. And real quick, I'm going to show you the creative process on our logo. And so these are the people, that's us, we're the joyful people. But this is the circle, it's like the infinite nature of God, which is nowhere and it's everywhere. And there's in threes. The top part is, let's liken it to a plant because that's easiest, is the seed, the thought. Okay, we come up with that. And the middle part is the law, it's the doer, it's the soul. That's the middle part of the creative process. And the bottom part are the effects. We receive the effects of our thinking. That's how it works. It goes into this neutral law of divinity. It's the doer that makes it happen. The law of attraction, you've heard of that, maybe can relate to that. No exceptions. No exceptions. This experience, it's a small experience really, but it had really a significant meaning. Because it showed me that if we work the law, which is let it go back to take that breath, get in alignment with that spiritual power, it will take care of everything. And there's always a lesson in every experience that we go through, even if it doesn't feel good. There's a lesson somewhere in there. I'd like you to say this after me. If I work with the law, it will work with me. It will work with me. It's the way it is. If we let go and let God, we're letting that law work, the doer work. And that, my friends, is where the power is. That's the power. Emmett Fox, a well-known New Thought author, once spoke about spiritual sunbathing. Look this. And what he says applies here. He wrote, "We need to learn to relax spiritually as well as physically. We easily forget that it is the power of God that solves our problem, not our own efforts in making our prayers that work. Spiritual sunbathing offers an excellent analogy here. In the sun, think about this, he writes, in sunbathing, you leave it to the sun to do the rest. You never think about trying to help the sun. You relax quietly and have perfect faith that the sun will do its work. In meditating on the presence of God, the same quiet, relaxed attitude will bring the inevitable result. That's why that breath is so important. It's so important because it brings us right back to center. Taking 3 deep, deep breaths just brings us right back to alignment, and then we can work our affirmations or whatever spiritual tools we would like to work at that time. We teach these tools in our classes and hopefully also in our talks here. Jesus, the master teacher, clearly taught that spiritual power works through us on the level of our belief. How deeply we believe in the divinity of God, this one God, not this duality, this one infinite power for good. It's for good, our good. The most infinite things start to take place in our lives. We can relax in that knowing. Yes, we take actions, but we let it come from that inspiration, not from our mind and the forcing of things to happen. But he called it the impersonal law, the impersonal principle, and principle means the divine law. And if it works for one person, it works for everyone. No one is left out. When the sun shines, it shines on everyone, not just a couple of people over there I'll give a tan to, and those people I'm going to ignore. It only makes sense. This spirituality only makes sense. Ernest Holmes wrote this in the Science of Mind book. The law is absolute, and we should trust its impersonal action implicitly. It can do anything for us that we can conceive of doing, which means all things are possible. And that's the truth. All things are possible. Our minds limit us. Our beliefs limit us. Many of us are not really conscious of the thoughts that are playing through our minds constantly, because we have 60,000 thoughts a day or more, just constant thoughts. That's what we do. So I wasn't conscious of this drama that I was playing out in my head, but it was all coming from fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of that some horrible thing is going to happen here, when it was all made up. How many of us do that? We make up scenarios in our lives, and then we go into this place of anxiety and fear, like, seriously, is it? No. That's when we take those breaths and realign ourselves. Get out of that automatic pilot that connects us. We're hardwired for anxiety and fear. It's in our DNA, if you will. But we can reprogram our DNA with new thoughts, new beliefs, new ways of being in the world, because the power of the divine is so much stronger and bigger and more powerful than our human thoughts. They're just thoughts that we think are real. When was the last time you used affirmative prayer? We teach that in our foundation class too. When was the last time you used prayer or even affirmations to get you through a situation, to help you? No matter what situation you're in, it doesn't make a difference. It's so much better and different. Before you take any kind of action, like sit, do a quick prayer, do a meditation, do whatever you need to do, and then take inspired action. It's different from forceful action. So, listen to this. I found this. It kind of went with this. I like it. I found this on the internet. Wonderful resources of the internet. A basketball in my hands is worth about $19. A basketball in Michael Jordan's hand is worth about $33 million. A baseball in my hands is worth about $6. A baseball in Mark McGuire's hand is worth $19 million. A golf club in my hand is pretty useless. A golf club in Tiger Woods' hand is major golf tournament wins. A rod in the hand of myself, I might be able to keep wild animals away, but in the hand of Moses, it divided the Red Sea. 2 fish and 5 loaves in my hand might make a few fish sandwiches. Good. 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread in Jesus' hand fed thousands. All things are possible if you believe that they are possible. That's how strong our belief truly is. We're so much more powerful than we could ever realize. So in whose hands do you want to live your life? If you keep living it just in yours, you'll find yourself trying to force and control situations. And I have to say, I say it to myself, how's that working for you? Not always well, very stressful, right? Letting go and letting God and just knowing the love of God, all things are possible, the universe always supports us. I've proved this to myself, as many of you have, over and over again. Situations that we're not supposed to work out, like this scenario that we've been taught. Like, this is what happens, like sitting down and writing budgets and stuff. This is all good. It doesn't work for me. You know, stepping out into the unknown. Stepping out into the unknown, like really, no place to really live or go, and you just have to let go and let God. Those kinds of situations in life that I know we've all been through, when we really trust, even though we're scared, but when we really trust, the most amazing things we could never ever plan take place. The most amazing things. But we must have the faith that there is a power that is always working for us and through us. And through us. The power of the universe is at our disposal. Ernest Holmes again writes, we are dealing with the same power that molds the planets and all that is upon them. And the limit of our ability to use this power is not in principle, but in our understanding of it. How do we understand what our thoughts are producing? We look at the effects in our life. If your life is not the way you want it to be, it's always going to come back to us doing a mind check. What am I thinking? What was I thinking? And then we have Judge Thomas Troward, who was a big influence on Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, science of mind. And he's a judge, so he's a little formal in this, but he was a major influence on Ernest Holmes with the law. He gave Ernest Holmes that missing piece. He knew thoughts created, but he didn't have the middle piece, the law, which is our soul, the law. So he writes this in his book, The Edinburgh Lectures. He's a little heady, so. If we realize this from the onset, we shall not undo our own works by endeavor to force things. For this reason, when the Bible says that he who believeth not shall make haste, it is enunciating a great nature principle that success depends on our using and not opposing. Just follow this. The universal law of growth. Our mistakes always eventually resolve themselves. Either we fancy we can hasten it by some exertion of our own and are then led into a hurry and anxiety state. So he is saying that the power of there's more of it. He's so heady. There's so much in him, but he really influenced Ernest Holmes in understanding how the law, all the spiritual laws, the law of growth, the law of attraction, the law of cause and effect. So many different of divine spiritual laws that are there, but we as humans, maybe we weren't taught it, and it's beyond our concept. But to know there's a power that is good and that is for us is the greatest gift we could ever give ourselves. It truly is. If we don't start resisting and freaking out from pure reaction, the spiritual prototype is an idea or a thought, a form in our minds. And that's what the law is working on. So you do not have to beg life to be good. You don't have to beg for God's favor, because that is all, I don't know, that just doesn't even resonate with me. If I have to beg anyone for anything, it's not going to resonate with me at all. But by opening up and allowing that there is a power for good in the universe, and it is operating through each and every one of us, is such a gift. We're never alone when we have that relationship, the relationship with that indwelling power. We have the power to create beautiful experiences in our lives. And this is not only for our lives, this is the life that is living through us. So it's not only we created to have a good life. This life is already present. It's already living through us. This God that we call God is living through us and as us. It's a force. It's an energetic force. And we get to use it. That's the thing no one told us. That's where the power lies, in using it. So let's take a breath together on that one. I need to take a breath. So this morning we're using the solar, S-O-U-L, power. We're going to connect with that in the coming weeks. And we're going to learn how we can live a life that is so inspired, that is so peaceful for us, because things don't bring peace. The soul brings peace. The connection with the divine brings peace. The peace is already present. So I am saying that we can open our minds, our hearts, our very beings, and know that there is a power that is waiting for us to recognize it, and is truly there to support us, to love us, to guide us. And I hope we all cultivate our relationship with it each and every day. And so it is.